Hi, good morning, good afternoon again. This is Matt Sheridan, co-host of the Working with Euphoria Studio Tips webcast. As always, with me is my co-host, Marc.
Good morning.
Marc, what are we talking about today?
Today we talk about 2D and 3D widgets and how to use it. We got a couple of questions in the forum, and we try to walk you through Euphoria Studio and how to use widgets.
Completely agree. As Marc said, we monitor the forum, and hopefully, as pilot participants, you're going to the forum to get pose questions, get answers, do some research on your own. And one of the top issues in the forum, in terms of questions, has been how do you just work with a particular model or geometry to change color, to change visibility. And so we're going to show you an example of that to start off with, and a 3D widget and how to work with that widget in order to achieve those objectives. Then a little bit later, we're going to talk a little bit more about 2D widgets, which we haven't spent a lot of time on in these webcasts. But to start out, Marc, we definitely want to go in and talk about how to work with the geometry and specifically how our widgets help make that process happen, color, visibility in particular.
Yeah, okay. So here we have a small little drone. And I already dropped a model widget, which you can see here in the model tree. And what we want to do is we drop a model item on the drone itself to control, for example, visibility or color. And the color is pretty simple. It's you can just pick a different color right here. Let's make it orange. And the next thing you see is its color is orange.
Pretty straightforward. So the model item widget, when you drag that over, if you drag it over, let's say the propeller or the other parts of the drone, it highlights the individual components. So you know which particular component you would put that model item widget on. And then once you put that model item on that component, you can now control that component as Marc did here with visibility or color or occluding or other aspects. So it's pretty straightforward, but it gives really good control over that particular component in your geometry.
Exactly. The model gives you control over, or the model widget, properties on the model widget, gives you control over the entire model. If you want to control or move it around, change the color, the visibility, whatever of a specific model item, drop a model item widget on this component and get going.
Okay. So now we've got our model item widget there, but we can also, or we might want to control that via an action. So a very popular request is, okay, so that's great, but can I change, let's say, visibility as part of the experience itself? Or somebody might pick a button and turn on and off visibility, toggle visibility to see inside an assembly. So can we show that, Marc?
Yeah, we can go, for example, on the 2D page. And here, first of all, what I usually do when I create or work on a 2D page, I use a grid layout, because the grid layout gives me the ability to control it a little bit better. So I drop a grid layout right here in our bottom panel. And what I can do in the grid layout is I can add additional columns or rows just by adding a row, adding a couple of different columns, so let's say here. So what you can see, we have like 4 columns now. And in those columns, I have the ability to change the alignment to, let's say, center or whatever I want to do. It's like PowerPoint. I think we talked about this before.
I believe so.
Yeah, but let's drop a toggle button on the first one. So and the toggle button now is in the center of the column. And let's give it a picture. So let's say play. And if it's not pressed, it's a pause button. And the properties of the button can actually, you can have click events, so event-driven or service-driven things. Or when I press it, I can control, let's say, the model. Well, let's actually drop it on the model item. Press it on the model item, and I can change the visibility.
So that's a big point. So the model widget itself, as you said, controls the entire set of geometry that you brought into the experience, but now we're controlling specific pieces of that geometry through the model item. And that's why that model item widget is so important.
Yeah, so let's go to the preview page. So I saved it, and we haven't used the preview page at all in our webcasts. So I would say it's saving it, it's open the preview, and first thing you should do, or I want to show you is, let's look at it as a phone in landscape mode. What I can do here is I can either use the 2D buttons or the 3D geometry. So now I can technically move the geometry around. If I hit 2D, I can use the buttons. And as you can see, I can toggle the visibility of this specific component.
Yep.
Where I drop the model item, so I can control it individually, and then I drive the visibility with the toggle button.
And you also can see that the color that Marc picked is available there as well. So in one very quick sequence, we've controlled the color of the particular component, and we've controlled the visibility of that particular component. So you could do that for other actions. In the action menu you saw there, we picked visibility, but there are certain other things that you can control through the actions available on the model item widget. So you can go back and take a look at those as well. So one of the things, before we go into the 2D, Marc, one of the things that we always want to point out to help people is the help.
The help.
The help gives some information, so maybe you could...
Sounds really straightforward, but you find the help center right here. And if I type in widget in the help center, and I start with 1, but what you can see here is a description of every widget and the properties on it. So let's say the audio widget supports WAV, MP3, MP4 formats. Here's what you can do with it, what all the properties do on it, and so on and so on. So there's a good description of every widget in the Help Center.
Yeah, agreed. So we ask you to consult this as your first stop in working with widgets, and as you start to dive into more widgets and start bringing more widgets into your experience, you can come here and get some of the details. And hopefully this gets past that first layer of just what is this widget and what can you do with it. So that's good information there. Absolutely.
So
now we want
some slides to share.
Yeah. So we wanted to go before we go into the 2D widgets. We've spent very little time here in our webcast series on talking about 2D and the 2D environment. And so we wanted to give you just some ideas. We're not going through an entire description of a UI or UI layout, but we wanted to help you as you start to think about bringing 2D into your experiences. So the first slide there was the Help Center. I want to definitely make sure everybody sees that. But as you build out an experience, some of the things that you should start to consider are what is the device that you're actually going to be deploying this experience on. So if it is on a phone device, if that's the item out there that your field people might be working with, then there are some best practices in working with those type of devices. You can see here in our picture, as you hold a phone or mobile device, you can start to see what areas people commonly select. And as you think about how you work with your mobile device today, you would agree that things that are in the easy zone there are where you put probably the app that you open the most or that you work with most. So you want to think about that as you start to put in 2D overlay information to interact with your particular experience. At the bottom of this slide there, we also include some links. These give you a site that talks about designing the different type of hardware products that are out there, whether it be a mobile phone or a tablet or a laptop. You can start to see what information these designers bring to bear, like the size of particular apps or the size of particular components within an app. So just a little bit of reference material for you that you can go take a look at. So that's one thing to consider as you start to work with 2D. The other thing to consider as well is with an AR experience, we now are able to treat the content as the star of the experience itself. So by that we mean let's not overload information into one view. Let's make sure that we have 3D geometry, that is taking center stage and we're not obscuring the view or making it difficult to work with. Sometimes when you lay something out in one device in one particular orientation, when you move it to another device or another orientation, it might obscure what's actually being you're trying to show. So you want to test it lay it out and make sure that you're not putting information in the 2D world that might obscure what's happening in the 3D world. The other thing that is very important to consider as well is we provide a lot of tools that can help you organize information. For example, working with views, which we have an excellent tutorial on our YouTube site. Working with views is one way that you could organize information so that you're not overcrowding or putting too much information into the experience at one time. So somebody who's working with the experience, if you need to provide different information or different interactions, one aspect that you could do is have different views for that experience. There's also other ways of organizing information, such as a grid that Marc talked about, so you're spacing things properly, or a list widget, which is also available. There's also a tab widget. So there's different organizational thought processes that you can bring to bear as you start to think about what information you're trying to convey in your experience as well. What you don't want to do is overload it, again, making it very hard for the end user to work with. And then the last thing to think about here is today we are combining the digital and the physical together. That's the augmented reality experience that we're able to bring with Studio. And one of the things that we talked about in a previous webcast was just optimizing the data, but also optimizing the experience so that when you're publishing the experience and then later when you're downloading the experience, you're not overloading the experience itself and the amount of data that you have to share with the end user. And one way of doing that is deciding what you really need to see when you're standing in front of the physical product itself. So if I'm only trying to see one sort of turning knob, or I'm only trying to see one button, then don't include all the geometry that goes with that particular product, because you only need to show the one areas that you're trying to highlight. So you need to think about it both in the physical and digital, and what is it that you're really trying to augment? What is it that you're really trying to convey to the end user in terms of instructions? And then back out from there, once you have the 3D, okay, so how do I want to interact with that, which is now the 2D layer? And then the final product is the complete AR experience. So again, there's more to designing the UI and working with, let's say, styling and that sort of things to get it looking polished. But as a starting point, these are some of the things you want to consider as you start to work on building out an experience.
Yeah, and on the last slide, we overlaid technically the 2D layout with a recommendation on how to do this. So we organized the 2D canvas in Vuforia Studio in a way that we have a top, left, right, center, and bottom panel. And usually the top panel, as we saw before, is really hard to reach. So I would put most of the interaction on the bottom panel, or maybe on the lower or left or right side. And yeah, all the information and content you want to display in the middle, and maybe some, let's say, a company logo, what we do next, on the top.
Agreed. So let's go back to Studio, and what we're going to do is show you a few 2D widgets and place them on the screen. And we want to highlight a couple of widgets that came into the product recently. So they weren't in there a while ago, but they came in with 1.4 or 1.5 release that you now have as a pilot participant. And they allow you to enrich your experience, make it more interesting to the end user. So let's take a look at a couple of those.
Yeah.
Marc.
So let's talk about resource image. So there's a difference between a resource image here, that is this widget, or the URL image on the bottom. And the difference is just the location of the image. In one, you load it into your experience as a resource. In the other one, it's a link to, yeah, maybe a web page where you get the image from. So we work today with the resource image. So I drop it on the top, and I can see on the resource image properties, I have a source, and as the source, I pick a company logo. It's pretty big right now, so we can size it here. Let's say we make it 25%. And yeah, save it and see how it looks in preview.
Yeah, so this is a common request, which is people want to include their company information or their logo to give it a much more branded feel and look when somebody opens the experience, and this is the way to do that. And we put in a nice logo that's got a transparent background, and you can see that this is how Studio renders it. So definitely right away we punched up this experience to give it a little more interest, and again, brand it.
Perfect. So next thing is, let's this is one of our new audio widgets, and the audio and as well as the video widgets are very, very similar if it comes down to the properties, but one is playing audio files, the other one is playing video files.
Yeah, this is an important point though. We like to talk about, when we say augmented reality experiences here, we always think again about the visual aspect of augmented reality. But as we've been talking to customers and we've been attending conferences and events, really people are thinking about how else can we interact with the experience, and audio is a big part of that. Not only does it make an experience interesting and much more exciting to hear the sound that goes with it, but you could actually use the audio, whether it's instructions or maybe it's an alert or something that really reaches out to the end user and they can hear it. That's part of the human experience in working with the physical product. So, we put it in there. It might seem like a very small widget in terms of what it can do, but it could add a lot of potential if you have it tied into some sort of alert or some sort of instructional material.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Sound make a big difference for experiences. So I dropped the widget, and under the resource now I can load the drone MP3. I uploaded all of those resources before, like the drone itself, the logo, and also the sound file. Yep. So let's preview it again, huh?
Yep.
So one thing to consider, if you keep the preview open all the time, you need to save it to actually upload or reload the preview. Okay. If you hit the preview button and it opens another tab for the preview, it automatically saves it. But in this case, yeah. So what we can see here is now we have our audio file, and guess what sound the drone makes. If I click on 2D and let's close the drone, and thanks for that file, Matt.
Yeah. So you could see if you were working in this experience, and we actually have one that we sent in the nurture email where you can actually fly a drone. Putting some audio in there would make it that much more realistic. So.
Very big request is the hyperlink widget as well. So which we put into our latest build, and it's right here, hyperlink. Let's drop it on hyperlink and call it maybe drone, and you can just put a URL in, yeah, and you're done with the hyperlink.
So in this case, we've dropped it.
Just not much more to say about it.
No, that's good. It should be that simple, exactly. So this is also a very popular request as we've been working. That hyperlink came in a previous update of the Studio software a few weeks ago, but a very, very popular request. Obviously, not every bit of information is going to make it into your experience. So if I can link to a different source of information while somebody's in the experience itself, then it just makes it that much more rich. And you can start to think about how to organize this if it was training or if somebody was working on servicing a component. This piece of, there might be some hyperlinks to get them out to the additional information. So,
yeah, here's my hyperlink. If I click on it, it obviously opens web page about drones. And yeah, it's really that simple.
Very, very simple. So, but that is the point here. So you can see in working with widgets, each widget has been defined to really help make it simple to put the information into the experience, make it simple for you to define interactions with the experience for the end user. And as you go through and try out some of these other widgets, you can see using the properties that the widgets have on the side and the help, you can start to really build out a very rich experience. So one thing that we also want to point out is that we have built up a tutorial list of some of the widgets that you can go check on our YouTube site. The YouTube site is not searchable, so you have to go through the link. The link for that site is on the download page on developer.vuforia.com. So if you log in and go to the download page, you can get to our YouTube site. And again, on there we have 3 5-minute tutorials for a whole bunch of widgets that you see here by some of our folks here at PTC who put together these tutorials. So in today's webcast, we're not going to be able to go through all the widgets that you have here, but we wanted to highlight a few that were new and that people have been really asking for and we've been hearing feedback on. But certainly some of the other ones are equally as valuable, whether that be simple checkbox or toggle or whatever that might be. You can go learn more about that on our tutorial page.
And of course, the Help Center.
And the Help Center, absolutely, Mark. So you can definitely go to the Help Center. And as always, you can ask and post questions up onto the forum. So we appreciate you joining us today. Shorter webcast compared to some of our other ones, but we're trying to convey information in hopefully a consumable manner that you can quickly refer to, come back to, watch again, and use it to build great experiences. So we appreciate your time as always, and look forward to seeing some of the experiences. We'd love it if you want to share those with us. We certainly would like to see them, and perhaps we can feature them in an email or a future webcast. Mark, great job as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody.